criteria for what is a new dramatist. I think the recording resumed. So there's no imposed organizational criteria for what is a new dramatist. So it's really defined from within the committee every single year. I will also say, because it comes up in often when in conversations I'm having with students when I go and visit their programs, that new is really relative. It does not mean young. It does not mean early career. It's really a spirit of what is new, right? So that's why within our company, there is, early career writers, there are mid-career writers, there have been later career writers. And I think it really is more about the spirit of new rather than a career status or age or anything along those lines. So the goal of the committee is to select by consensus an incoming group of up to 7 playwrights to whom we offer time, space, and a really diverse, eclectic, and dynamic company of peer writers. And it's that time and space is for them to make work, or for you to make work for 7 years. You really set the terms for what that 7 years means to you, to your art making, to your process making, to the experiments you want to undertake, to see what are the kind of broadest range of what you're doing as your voice as a writer, as a playwright, as a theater maker. So those are the primary resources. To achieve this goal, the committee commits to undertaking a rigorous reading schedule of 10 plays every 2 weeks, and that will start probably in August, late August, early September. They evaluate the plays, they make recommendations for the plays they're reading, and then they bring those recommendations to 3 in-person meetings where the work is discussed with the other committee members. For this year, we're looking to hold those meetings in January, April, and June, and probably over 2 days. In the past, we would do one very long day, and those meetings could range from 10 to 15 hours. That just gives you a kind of sense of how thoroughly discussed the work actually is. But we felt that, I don't know, in the COVID world, maybe a 15-hour day in a room together, even if it's well ventilated, maybe is not the best way to conduct that. So we're going to do those meetings over 2 days. So at these meetings, as I said, the committee discusses the work, they winnow the list together, and ultimately select by consensus the incoming group of up to 7 new playwrights to join the company, receive free 7-year residencies. It's important to note that the staff does not participate in the decision making. Our job is really to facilitate a process for those 7 to do this work and to make those decisions. The committee is primarily made up of writers who are using the submitted plays to intuit the writer behind those plays. They're really choosing writers, right? Not plays, right? The committee's not looking for plays to produce. They don't need to program a season. They're really reading for, my experience, they're reading for the sparks that are elicited by your work. And for writers for whom they have strong feelings about what they're doing, what you're up to, and the values that they as a committee collectively share for the theater. Like what is it? Some of the conversations, we start the process by what is it that you want to support and promote in the theater, and that's part of the decision making too, or what are those values that they as a committee define together. In my experience, it's a really thoughtful, deliberated, considerate process. And of course, the difficult one is there are always more talented playwrights than we can support at any given time. I would also reiterate that because so many of the writers are current residents or alums, inevitably we hear throughout, at some point in the process, somebody says, I just don't know how I got in. It's very difficult. Are there any questions so far before I about that? That's the overview of how this works. And it's really a year for the staff because we're already in the process in terms of preparing materials and building the committee and opening the window. So it's a really around the calendar process. How many, it's a great question. Thanks, Phil. How many writer applications do we receive every year? Well, Naveen, I think you had the number from last time. We haven't done it for 2 years, but Naveen, go ahead. I'm going to pass it to you anyway. So
last year we got, the last year we did this, we had 517.
And I will just note that since we went paperless, which is now maybe over 10 years ago, that's been about average. I would say, between 500 and 530 applications every year. So again, any of you in the math geniuses here, sort of, it's a fairly small percentage of who we are able to offer those 7-year residencies, considering. So again, I just want to say that it's never about, oh, those are the 6 or 7 best writers from 500. It's really who that committee feels strongly about. It's more about promoting work forward than it is about rejecting other plays. It's really like what drives it is that passion for the work and then what they can decide on by consensus. I see there's another question. Okay, but it's just that when do in-person readings resume at New Dramatists? We're working on that. I think right now that's related to COVID things. We're hopefully going to be able to program in-person events in the fall. It might be on site, it might be in rental spaces. The 1 and 2 day readings will continue to be virtual. So we're in process with that right now, trying to figure some of that out, John. And then Jennifer Mazel, how many national members are accepted versus local? In the past, based on conversations we've had with the Writers Executive Committee, we've maintained a kind of 70% in town and 30% national. That's kind of the ratio. I think with some of that's something too that I think we will have to think about and talk with the writers exec about with COVID, because right now one of our major resources is not available, like which is Seventh Heaven. But what I wanted to say about that, yeah, I think that will be something that might come as a later recommendation that we get from the writers exec, from the conversations with staff and board around resources that might influence that ratio. So I can't say for sure, but in the past it's been 70-30. Selma, yeah, I mean, that's the encouragement, is that yes, that they read from cover to cover. Yeah, because who knows where that spark is, right? It's not necessarily, it's really about like, what is the writer doing, and where that spark falls can happen anywhere in the play. So that's encouraged, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Naveen, do you, continue to ask questions. I want Naveen to go through the new guidelines. Anyone, though, before we go into that, I think Melissa or John want to say anything about the process at all? Is what I covered before. No?
I don't think I have anything to add right at the moment, but I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you. Okay, take it away, Naveen.
Thank you. I will just say, per Selma's question, that that each play that gets read, the person who's the reader on the panel has to write up a little summary to enter into the system. So because people are reading hundreds of plays, literally. So just to help the panelists keep things straight, they do write a little summary. So yes, everything is definitely read to the end. So I'm just going to go through the actual application process. as Emily mentioned, the window will open on Friday, July 15th at 10 a.m. I just in the chat dropped the link to the page that you'll go to. If you go to that page now, you'll see all the application guidelines and all of that information. On July 15th at 10 o'clock, you'll also see a link to the application itself. If you go there on July 15th at 9:59, you won't see it. So the window will be open for 2 weeks until Friday, July 29th at 5 p.m. And all of this is Eastern time. After the window closes, we will spend a week checking to see that all application packages are complete and correct, meaning that we have all the materials that are required, that they are in fact full-length plays, that do not include any personal identifiers because the first round of plays are read blind. And if we find anything missing or incorrect, we will reach out to you by Monday, August 8th, so a week later. And you'll have 1 week after that until Monday, August 15th to submit corrected materials. If you don't respond by Monday, August 15th, then your application will be deemed ineligible. So when you follow this link to the application, once the link exists, you'll be asked to create an account. If you have applied to, say, the Princess Grace Fellowship or the Kleban Fellowship recently, or if you applied to New Dramatists in our last cycle in 2019, you won't need to create an account. You can use your old credentials. So the first thing the application will ask is, are you eligible? So if you are a US citizen or if you have permission to work in the US, then you'll be taken to a page with just your name, address, phone number. And then you'll be uploading a one-page letter of intent. So that's something you'll want to write separately outside of the application system and save as a PDF and then upload. And basically the letter of intent, you want to address these types of questions. What made you choose the 2 plays to submit with your application? And what would you sort of like the committee to know about that? How would you benefit from a community of diverse and dynamic peer writers? And basically, how would a residency contribute to your growth and journey as an artist, as opposed to how would it sort of help your career? I think I always hear Emily saying that we develop playwrights and not plays. And so that's something to think about, is sort of where you are in your artistic journey and how a residency might be relevant to you on that level. And then we'd also love for everyone to describe a little bit your other time commitments. Do you feel like you have a reasonable amount of time to commit to using all of the programs and resources that New Dramatists provides? Do you have any obstacles to that, and how you might sort of manage that? Then you'll be led to a page where you upload another file, either a resume or a bio. And then you will be led to a page where you upload your plays. So everyone submits 2 plays, and you decide which one is sort of your A play, the one that gets read first, and which one's your B play. For every single applicant, let's say there's 500, all 500 applicants will have their A play read. So you want to put some thought into which one you want to have be your A play, the one that definitely gets read. If you move forward, if your application moves forward after the first round, all of those applicants will have their B play read as well. There are some cases in which a B play gets read before moving to that round, and it really depends on the number of applications we receive. If we receive, 700 applications, probably none of the B plays will be read until the second round. If we only receive 300 and have more time to read more plays, then probably a lot of those will get read. So you will upload the cover sheet of your play, which will include your contact information and your name. And then you'll upload a script which does not include any contact information or your name, so that the plays can be read blind. So you'll do that for your A play, your B play. You can also, if, for example, your play is a play with music, you can upload an audio file to go with it. And then you will submit your application. You will receive a auto email confirmation so that you know that it actually was submitted. And then if you don't hear anything afterwards, that means your application looks good, it's complete. You can assume that we've got it from there. But you should, look out for an email that might let you know that your application isn't complete between July 29th and August 8th. And that is pretty much the application process. Are there any questions so far? Can you talk about the first round versus second round? Emily, do you want to take that one? Or
I can. I just want to also note, I saw Geraldine's hand up, and then there's Julie Ray's question in the chat as well. So to Emma, right? I think Emma. Yes, Emma. Yeah, there are actually 3 rounds. There are 3 rounds. Round 1 also includes it includes a preliminary round. And again, this was determined by some numbers when we went paperless, and the writer's exec kind of helped us form a process where we invited, at that point, alumni to come in and read with the committee to help manage the numbers and make recommendations through it's like a ranking system. It's a 5-point ranking system with qualitative descriptions to each number, so that we could have a kind of cohesive response to the degree you can with subjectivities at work for us. So there's a preliminary round. There's a preliminary conversation that we have with the committee where there's aggregate numbers that we look at. There's sort of recommendations that are made, and the committee ratifies those recommendations or doesn't ratify them, in which case there's a process that is undertaken in that preliminary round. So for example, if there are plays that received only a 1 or a 2 by their readers, we might recommend that those are released at this time. We might recommend that the 4s and the 5s are advanced at that time. And then there's usually a 3 where there are a lot of different questions. And the experience in the past is most of the time the committee will say, let's just read them because there are so many questions, we want to have those in the discussion. So then the reading continues so that the committee reads any of the plays that have been advanced by the alumni readers, so that when they come into the room, everyone has read the plays that are being discussed. The recommendations from the alums are not brought into the room. It's all the committee work. So that's the first round. That's like the first meeting is just discussing all the plays that have been advanced at that point, or that have been recommended to advance or release. I'm sorry. They talk about all of those plays. And there's a considerable amount of plays that are let go at that point in the first round. And that's the first time the names will be disclosed to the committee. At that point, they're aware, they become aware of who wrote what play. The second round, then they read some more, 10 plays every 2 weeks. We try to get maybe 3 or 4 different readers on each applicant to come into that middle meeting that would be in April, so that there's more dynamic discussion and about both the A plays and the B plays. They're getting a bigger picture of what who this writer might be. And the focus of both of those meetings, the focus of those discussions is all about the work itself. There's no sort of candidacy that's discussed. There's no resume, credentials, or anything like that. It's all about the feeling for the work that committee has. The goal of the second meeting is to name finalists. So it sort of goes from a process of winnowing, which is the sort of first content, the kind of focus of the first meeting. The second meeting is naming finalists. At the end of the meeting, that second meeting, they might have between 20 and 25 finalists. Everyone reads all the plays then towards the final meeting, which would be in June, and they come in having read all the plays. And then they discuss, and the goal of that meeting is to determine by consensus who the incoming writers will be. And I want to talk, because Naveen was talking about the statement of interest. It is at that meeting, and usually about halfway through that meeting, when those statements of interest are introduced into the conversation. Because at that point, arguably, there are writers in that group, that finalist group, for whom one or multiple people feel very strongly about. So it's sort of difficult. How do you move the process forward? That is the first time that they would hear from you directly, right? At this point, they've been intuiting who you are as a writer through your plays. So that is the moment where your voice and your statement comes into the room, if that makes sense. And I think like the questions that Naveen had kind of crafted, and we worked together to sort of figure out what those questions were, really come from the questions that the committee is asking at the point, like, I want to know why they chose these two plays. I want to know sort of what they're going for, or what kind of artist, is this person, or what are the kinds of experiments they want to conduct, and how do they want to use this time in this community. So I think that some of those, the questions that Naveen just brought into the room are really things that the committee is asking at that point, right? In addition to your plays and the strength of feeling around your plays, like what else? What do we want to know at that point that helps us try to figure out to whom we're going to offer these particular resources? So does that help answer your question, Emma, and maybe other questions that might have come up around that the three round process? Okay, great. Geraldine, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I have a very specific question. Essentially, the play that I'd like to submit, that my play A is the only version of it that exists that is most up to date, is a galley for, it was just published. And I was wondering if I could just take off my contact info and submit the galley, because it's a PDF, I just don't have a final draft PDF version of this play. I know that's a very unusual question, but I was frantic and I couldn't, I don't know how to put that in an email.
Oh.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I mean, if it's a PDF, it's a galley. If you can remove your any identifying information, then
Yeah.
I don't see why not. I mean, it would just be a PDF, right?
Yeah, it would just be the body of the galley with no, and it also fits your rule of having the name of the play on each page.
Awesome. That's very important. That's great. And it has page numbers, right? Which is
It has
awesome.
page numbers. Yeah. Okay.
I think, yeah, congratulations on the publication. That's nice.
Oh, thank you.
Naveen, do you have, I don't know, before I, say yes, does that seem okay? Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I don't think we had an instance of that happening the last cycle. So I don't immediately know the answer, but I don't see any reason why not.
as long as it can hold its formatting and in like any other PDF, I feel like it's a PDF then, right? Even if it's a galley, that seems okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Naveen. I'm going to go back to Julie's question. Julie, is it Julie or Julie Ray? What's your, Julia? Julia, thank you. Sorry. Okay, so Julia's question is, do you think it's a better idea to choose plays that are highly polished, or might it be worth it to submit a draft that's still in development, perhaps speaks better to your newest work? I see Elizabeth has that same question, and I know this is a very common question to ask. Melissa, do you want to, I have thoughts about that, but I'm going to let Melissa answer that since she's been there.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that you should submit the 2 plays that you want to submit. And what I mean by that is if you have 2 really polished plays that you feel represent your work the best, submit those. They might be older. Maybe the new thing is something you're just trying out. You're not sure you're good at. You're not sure you even want to do. But it's still your newest experiment. But if you're not sure, and if you're not feeling like this is a direction that you're really passionate about yet, then I would say hold off on that. Go with the ones that you're really like, this is really me, But if you also have like a wide range of plays, I'm one of these writers that I like write something very different every time. And when I submitted one that I felt was more polished, that was a little bit older. And then I submitted a brand new, like nobody had seen it kind of play. It wasn't finished. And I'm pretty sure that people who read it understood that it wasn't, but it wasn't the first draft. It was probably like the 5th or 6th draft, and they were very, very different. And because my name wasn't on either of them, I think there were people who probably were like, I can't believe the same person wrote these 2 plays, I mean, that is something that said a lot of my work anyway. So I just feel like I accept that. And I submitted both of them and I got in on both of them. So I just feel like, and I will also say that, I was part of the reading committee 1 year while I was a resident. And the people that I think offered spots to, it was a broad range of people. Some of them had plays that were very different from each other, the 2 plays that they submitted, and some of them had plays that were like almost like the same, like you could totally tell it was the same voice, the same person, same writer, you know what I mean? Because it was like, sometimes there were plays that were set in the same town even, and they're just exploring different people from those towns. So it's not to say that one is a better, option than the other. Overall, I would say kind of like you have to ask yourself, what is the most important to you as an artist in terms of the direction that you're going. And then I think that's a good way to lead, also because there's a part of the, there's like, I don't remember which part of the written sort of like when you're talking about, your submissions and why you submitted what you submitted.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, she's gonna like.
Oh no!
Like the the Holy Grail is about to come out of her mouth. Oh, Melissa, you're frozen. But she's giving great advice, I would say.
Applicants before, and
you froze for a minute, Melissa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. What did you you were about to say?
Oh, when I think that question was not put to the applicants before. The year that I was on the committee, the reading committee, we didn't get a clear picture of where a particular piece was in the trajectory of this person's artistry. So we couldn't tell, like sometimes the A play is like the brand new play, and sometimes the A play is the really polished old play. We couldn't tell. And we didn't really have a way of, contacting the writer and saying, so tell us about these 2. Now that question is something that is put to the applicants. So, take advantage of that opportunity to talk about your work a little bit more, if you feel like that's, that will help. I think it does. I think it's, I think it's good for you as well as it is for the reading committee, right? Because anytime you're forced to like write these statements about yourself, you really have to kind of dig, and understand, well, like, why am I writing? What is this, that I'm doing? It's a good question to ask. I mean, it's a good question to ask once a year, probably, of yourself anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. I would, the only thing I would add to that, and it's Melissa referenced this, when you have committee members who are reading hundreds of plays, like my feeling is that you want to go with, I've said this in many of these meetings, so forgive me if other people have heard me say that, go with what you feel passionate about, because I feel like if the fire is in you, the fire, potentially catches on with the committee. If you feel like, meh, then that can also become the sort of way that the committee feels about your work. So I feel like it's where that heart and passion are for what you're doing. And it can be also a polished play, but it's like your calling card, the calling card play, really. I think this speaks a little bit to Selma's question, which I'll get to, but does that help you, Julia, with and also I think
Yes,
Elizabeth too. Yeah.
yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Elizabeth, are you satisfied with the answer that you got to? There you are. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, Linda asked about how many plays are left after the first round. Is there an average? It can be between, I'm trying to think, it's like 120. We've gotten down to 90. So it's it can be like 120 to about 90. I think that's what we've managed in the past in the first round. I see that Naveen answered Heather's question. Yeah. Where else are we here? Sorry. If play A makes a great first impression, can the reader go immediately to the writer's B play to keep the voice of the writer fresh? Can you say a little bit more about that, Selma, what you're asking?
Well, I guess my question would be like, if let's say you read the first play and something it intrigues you some, hopefully it intrigues you so much that you want to read the second one.
Oh yeah.
To keep the perspective of the writer.
Oh yeah. That happens. Yeah, I mean, what Naveen was describing was just sort of the process and the sort of typical procedure, and Melissa can also speak to this as well, that, we ask the committee to be very transparent about both potentially their limitations around certain kind of content or style, which means like, oh, this is a historical play. I'm not the best reader for that. I think somebody else should read this. They tell us that in their notes. So we would circulate that play to somebody else. The same would go, and conversely, if somebody's like, oh my God, they don't know if it's an A or B play, just to clarify, I do want to say about that part of the process. So Naveen, remind me about the advocacy moment for the writers. But the readers don't, I mean, they could assume that most of the plays they're reading are A plays, but I'll let Naveen explain that. But let me just also finish my thought. If somebody loves something and they're like, I'm just dying to know what else this writer wrote, or they could be so intrigued, to your point, that the word you used, they can request to read the other play. They can say, I just want to read the other play because there's something here that's, intriguing me, and I want to know what else they're doing. So they request the other plays throughout the process as well. Is that fair, Melissa? Did you? Naveen, do you want to talk about the advocacy thing? The advocacy moment?
Sure. If I think I know what you're talking about, but tell me if you mean something else. So basically the way that plays are circulated is that at the very beginning, it's a little bit random. The goal is basically to get all the A plays read. And so the distribution is sort of randomly assigned to readers. After that, once all the A plays are read, we try to assign plays as much as possible to people who are likely to like them. Is that what you're talking about, Emily?
No, I was talking about the list of the applicants to the company, but I think that's a good point that you're also making.
Okay.
too. I appreciate you bringing that up into the conversation. as well.
Yeah, okay, I will talk about that in a second. So, thank you. So if someone reads your A play and is in love with it, and asks to read the B play, then yes, by all means, we will have them read the B play. If someone reads your A play and says, you know, I personally am just not into family dramas, we probably won't then give the B play to that person. We'll always assign plays to sort of help that person move forward, if that makes sense. What Emily was talking about is at the beginning of the process, every current resident is given a list of all the applicants. And each resident is allowed to choose one applicant to advocate for. And that list of applicants, both their A play and B plays are read during the first round.
Apply for, it's like an impossibly prestigious residency.
I think someone is unmuted and they don't mean to be.
Uh-oh.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, I think, yes, yes, yeah. So yes, so just to reiterate that when we circulate the list of applicants to the current resident company, they would throw advocacy to one of the applicants. Both their A and B play are automatically circulated to different readers. That's the only advantage, right? There's no status shift or change. And that's the point that I was making to you, Selma, and others, that's why no one knows if they're reading the A or the B play at that point. You know what I mean? They don't know who the writer is even so I think that's, but they can always say, I would really like to read the other play, you know, of this author. Okay.
And I think it's also probably important to say that the panel doesn't see that list of playwrights who were sort of recommended by residents. That's kept confidential.
Thank you. What else hasn't been answered here? I think MJ, can you submit a full-length one-person solo play as one of your samples? Absolutely. We have had several writers who have had 7-year residencies at New Dramatists with solo work. Dale Orlando Smith comes to mind immediately. Taylor Mack comes to mind immediately. Those are the ones that are right at the top of my head. So absolutely. Megan and Melissa, maybe you would field this. Should we include trigger warnings anywhere in the application materials? And if so, where? Guessing the first page of the script, not the cover sheet. Do you have thoughts about that, Melissa?
Yeah, I think for anybody who has trigger warnings that they would like to put, I think they're welcome. And it would make sense to put on the top of the first page of the play, not the cover sheet, because I think what's going to happen is someone's going to open up the play and just jump right in, probably without reading any of the other materials. And if you have a trigger warning at the top, you know, it's helpful. I think that if you are used to putting them in your plays, like at the top, you know, or on the front page, do it with New Dramatists, you know, continue that practice. I think that if you're not used to it, you don't have to suddenly go, I need to research what this is and I need to find all the trigger warnings in my play. I don't think you have to do that either. Do what's comfortable for you. Trust that the readers are going to be generous. I think that, think of it as like a community of players who would love to like say yes to everybody, you know? And then if you don't put a trigger warning, it's not going to make someone say, oh, I'd rather not say yes to this person. They will just be a little bit like surprised or shocked at the moment that the surprise or shock happens. And, you know, they will continue to read the play. So sure, trigger warnings, add them and put them on the top of your anonymous script if you have that inclination.
I think we skipped a couple of questions in the chat. Let me find them. How many, no, we did that. How long should the bio be in lieu of a resume? That's a good question. It's a file that you upload, so there isn't really a limit. Probably a 10-page bio is too long. But a page or maybe 2 pages, if you have a lot of credits that you want to share, I think is reasonable.
I would also, excuse me, add to that, in addition to length, it's the bios and resumes are more reference for a committee than they are factors or determinants in the process. So this might actually encourage something even shorter or more succinct, right? Because it's kind of, most of the time, and Melissa, you can speak to this too, that it's like, people are like, hey, I think I was at a residency with that person. Can I look at their resume as a way of confirming, oh yeah, I know that writer or something. Melissa, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that you're totally right about that. Nobody even talked about who they suspected was the writer or who they knew was the writer and that they knew them or any of that until much further into the process. And it was just like, it just so was not an important part of it. The main thing was what the work was doing. I would say that even before the bio, the statement of intent was, the thing that most of the people on the committee paid the most attention to, I think, when it came down to, we've whittled it down to 20. How do we whittle it down? Because we couldn't, there aren't enough resources, to support 20 people. So then we thought, okay, let's bring out the statement of intent. And that, I think, I don't know if there's a page limit or a word limit on that, but I think like maybe 1 to 2 similarly to the bio makes sense. And then because of that, because the bio is so much about like, here are all my great accomplishments, or here's what I've done in my life. And that's important to see, it's important to see that in a bio resume. But I think that what's more important for the committee is like, who is this person? And I think you get that more authentically through a statement of intent.
May I jump in for just a quick second here, Melissa? Speaking to the letter of intent, particularly, what New Dramatists is offering is 7 years at New Dramatists, right? You have space, you have time, you have access. We bring in, collaborators. We bring in actors, directors, any collaborators you can have, historians, puppet makers, clown, whoever it is, whatever it is you're looking to explore is who we try to facilitate. So the question is with your letter of intent, how would you use the 7 years? Like, if you know you're going to be out of the country for the next 2 years, why would you apply now? Because you're not going to be available to actually use the facilities that we're offering for at least 2 years. So it's thinking about that too in your letter of intent is important, just in terms of how, in fact, you would use the lab to continue the development of your work and how you would continue the development of yourself as an artist.
Thank you, John. That's right. And Melissa, thank you. Does that help with that? And I think I see this question from Leslie about, can you give a few more details about letters of intent that have moved or inspired you? I have some examples, but maybe Melissa, like, again, because where that falls in the moment without disclosing, like, what, because they're information. Sometimes they can move someone in a particular direction, but they're just like they kind of complete a picture that may have been forming based on your work. So Melissa, do you want to take that a little bit too on that?
Yeah, I think that the statements of intent that spoke to me the most, I can speak for myself, are the ones that, really felt like like I was talking to this person, like I knew them. So I mean, I think that it's so hard, I think, to write statements of intent in general, right? For this opportunity, but it's for like any other opportunity where they ask you to like talk about, you know, like who you are as an artist and why you do it, which I mean, these are important questions, but I think the easiest way to tackle that is to pretend or to actually do this, talk to someone that you know very well who is also in the arts, you know, who understands the language of the artist. And then, you know, either write them an email or write them a letter or talk to them in person and record yourself, you know, and then transcribe it. That is going to sound like a real person, not someone who's like, I'm going to hit all the, like, you know, the phrases that I've seen in so many other like people's bios, you know, because what we don't want is to read something that looks like a boilerplate bio, as fancy as it might sound and as woke as it might sound. I mean, be woke, be fancy, but be yourself. That's what I would say. You know.
And I would add too to that, thank you, Melissa, that additionally, this is not the question you asked, but I think this is a little bit with the work, with what you submit as well. I would caution you against trying to second guess the committee, what they want to read, what they want to hear, because you can, I don't think that's the way. I don't think that's putting yourself forward in a way. You're trying to determine a committee that changes completely and how they interact and how their subjectivities and passions will commingle. It's impossible to anticipate that. So you have to go with where your gut is, where your heart is, and your truth is in that regard, what Melissa was saying. So I would just say that. And yeah. Did I miss anything else, Naveen? I don't know if you're, but
No,
there was a question Stephen asked. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Naveen.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we're caught up if we keep going in order.
Thank you. Stephen asked a question: if a play has had an equity showcase or a college production, is it still eligible? Absolutely. It's your work, right? This is the productions of your plays really have nothing to do with this process, actually, right? That's that might be something more like the Princess Grace Fellowship, and I'm not sure if that's what you're referencing, but here this is really about what your work and how it represents you as a writer, not where it's been produced or who produced it. Does that answer your question, Stephen? Thank you for that. Okay. Feedback given. Oh, Selma. No, we don't give feedback. Because again, this is your work. This is not, this is, no, we don't give feedback because it's, your work is perfect. You know what I mean? It's sort of, that's not what this process is for. You know, it's, yeah.
Thanks. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's a good question. It's asked often, you know, do people, and yeah, it's not really relevant to what you're doing, I don't think. And it can be very misleading and it's not really appropriate, I think, for you as an artist to,
Thank you. Yeah, well, makes sense. Yeah.
just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. And Leslie, I don't know if we satisfied your question, did we?
Yes, you did. I said thank you. Yeah, that was very informative. I like the whole idea of writing a letter to a friend. There's actually a couple of them on here that I'm probably going to do that to later on this evening. You know who you are. But yes, thank you. That was very, very helpful.
Okay. Emma, can you talk a bit about the experiments that people are carrying out in their residencies as examples? Sure. John, you want to take that? Naveen? Melissa? I mean,
I'm sorry, what is the question?
The question is, Emma asked, can you talk a bit about the experiments that people are carrying out in their residencies, for, like, to give examples of what people are doing? Evil experiments are happening in the lab.
I know. Well, you know, it's very interesting to see how all the different artists actually have used New Dramatists in very different ways. So some have actually used it And I like to use actually Mia Chung as an example for her play, Catch as Catch Can. She started writing it in 2015. And basically over the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, basically every month or so, she came back in and would do these closed readings of the play. And she just kept developing it and refining it. And so I think I think we counted 16 or 17 different, closed readings that happened over those 3 years in terms of developing that particular play until she got it into a place that she was happy with and then moved forward for production. There have been other writers who come in and use the dramatists to basically explore the way they work. So in fact, as opposed to simply looking at developing a piece, they've actually said, I've always worked one way. I've always worked sort of in the privacy of my room, and I sit home and I write this play. I think about it and then I write it. I've never done it actually as a collaboration. So I want to try working as a collaboration at New Dramatists. We'll bring in some collaborators who can be whoever they're interested in working with. It can be other writers, it can be other playwrights, it can be directors, or a combination of which. And they actually explore how they want to develop, how they would actually work in collaboration with other collaborators to actually create a piece. So it's wide open, and it's anything that you can imagine, or anything that you're interested in exploring, is what we are here to facilitate. And so there's no minimum, there's no requirement. Basically, we ask you to sort of run your process here. And of course, your interests may change over 7 years, and that's absolutely fine. And so those are just a couple of examples of the way some of the writers that actually use their time here at New Dramatists.
Melissa, you want to speak from your own experience?
Sure. I think that one of the first things that I did when I became a resident was I workshopped actually one of the plays that I had submitted. And what was really helpful about that workshop was that we wanted to have somebody who could choreograph for us. And it wasn't just sort of like straight dance choreography. It was like it was a mix between movement and sport because it involved playing soccer. And we wanted to sort of combine what you see on a soccer field with the sort of like stylized movement. And I didn't know how to do that. And the director that I was working with at the time also didn't know how to do that. So we brought in somebody, and that was somebody that New Dramatists was able to help facilitate that collaboration. I would not have been able to do it on my own. And also there was space to do that. Later on at New Dramatists, I started experimenting with ways of like my process of making. And one of the things that I got to do in the building where they had, it was set up so that there was a room that had a table with chairs around it that people could sit at. And upstairs, there was a pantry where a meal could be made. And so one of the things that I did for a workshop process was I used that pantry area to make a meal, and then I served it at the table to collaborators. And it was, most of them were performers. There was a director there. There were also, there was a stage manager there, and everybody participated. And it was during that meal that was served that we were continuing to develop the work, because we put questions to the collaborators. And as they were participating in the meal, they also responded to the questions, which helped me work on the script. So that was like another way of, making work or workshopping work that I had never tried before, that I was able to do because of just like the way that the building, was like existed, in space, that there was a pantry, that there was a space where people could sit around and have a meal. I've also, actually during the pandemic, I think that it was myself and another resident, Corinne Keithley-Sayers, and Emily, actually, like in sort of conversation, sort of like casual conversation about what theater could look like if it wasn't in a physical space. And then we started talking about audio theater, and Corinne has done a lot of work in the audio space, in the audio maker space. And we created, like a theatrical audio series called Active Listening. And it's like these sorts of experiments, sometimes they just come up because you just start talking about, I wonder if there's a way that's different, another way of doing things. And, you could say that to Emily and she'll be like, oh, tell me more. What are you thinking? And then she'll like help draw out maybe different ways that new dramatists could support, if that's something that you want to, if that's the next step you want to take, or is it just, you just want to talk, or is it just that you just want to brainstorm? I mean, she'll be there to help you brainstorm also. So those are, like in terms of experiments, it's just, for me, it was experimenting with process as well as what was happening on the page. And a lot of it just happened because of what was happening in the world. Like it wasn't like I went into New Dramatists knowing this is exactly what I'm going to do for the next 5 years. And even when people who think that usually change course over those years. So maybe you think you know what you're going to do the first year, and then you do it, and after that, it's like, the sky's the limit, really.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, I think that's, one of the things that I remember Lucy Thurber saying, that at New Dramatists, it wasn't just about learning about her work, it was learning about how to make her work. And so that's something, I think that speaks to what both John and Melissa were saying, that there's ways to figure out how you want to do what you are doing, or doing something different. And those are experiments that just can happen in space. It's all game, right? Even if it's like, well, that didn't work, but at least it's something you tried and discovered, but it might lead to something else, right? It's like going through it to see what else might be there. I want to go back to sort of Selma's question, because I think one of the reasons that we don't give, there's lots of reasons why not to give feedback, but I actually want to sort of speak to that in a different way. And I know we're at time, but I do want to say this, and it's to reiterate that the committee changes completely every year, right? So again, going back to these stark numbers, like going from 500 to somewhere between 5 and 7 incoming writers is really severe. And again, it's never that those are the best 7 or the only good writers. There are so many good writers within that group. So what I say to people is, there's no reason not to reapply. And I would say most of the company members have applied multiple times. And the encouragement I would give is you never know when you're going to find your committee, right? So maybe there's a committee that didn't respond to your work or did, but it didn't get to that end zone, but you just never know, right? There are people who apply, who are finalists one year, who are released in the first round the next, who then get to be, come in as residents. So I think that speaks to the point about why there's no objective feedback that we could give you that would be useful, right? It's all subjective. So you just want to keep pursuing the opportunities until you find a committee that's like this, where the ignition goes off, and that's what happens. So I think that's to everyone. And I say this, that more people apply more times than get in on the first time. That's just reality, so I would just end with that, unless there are other questions. And Naveen, did we miss anything? No,
nothing that I can think of.
okay. Great. Well, I want to thank all of you for spending this hour with us virtually. I want to thank our incredible panelists for their time, Naveen and Melissa and John, Chloe, Tyler, who's been doing the sort of back rooms on this. Just thank you for being here today. Thank you for your work and your interest. And again, if you have other questions that come up, you can reach out to us. And good luck and take care. Stay well, everyone. Thank you.